fine. That's very okay. You heard him with your own ears and with your own eyes. You saw him and the job that at his age as a messenger is still doing in the community. And you will know from Prof, are you ready? I'm so sorry.
No, ma'am, I'm never ready. That's hard. It's hard to really be ready, but I'm ready to participate.
Wonderful. Good.
Um,
Um,
I know you're making me the teacher, but the individual is never the teacher. It's us. It's the group that's teaching. Every response, every reaction teaches. I'm going to try to give some information in forms and format that would make sense given our situation in the world. And so I would like to thank everyone who has tuned in and who will tuned in, because we're really talking about liberation. We're talking about freedom. We're talking about reconstructing the African personality, the African spiritual and cultural selves, the African intellectual self. You were talking about slavery, and I don't hit my host too hard, but you cannot in any way compare the servitude of indigenous traditional African society to what the Arabs, the Muslims, the Europeans, and the Christian produced as slavery. And much of
right.
the time period that you were referencing is a time period after Islam have fought multiple genocides across West Africa and across the Sudan to capture our territories and our people. And they're participating in something as bad or worse than chattel slavery in the Atlantic for 1,500 years before 1492. So see, this thing didn't start just after the Berlin Conference. This war has been upon us since the Greeks and the Romans, the Hittites and the Hyksos, and the Persians invaded our land, starting in Northeast Africa, driving millions of us towards Sudan and Central, what we call the Central Sudan in West Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens over thousands of years of disruptions and destruction of a people's civilization, the Great Kemetic civilization, the Great Sudanic civilization, the Great Zimbabwe civilization, the Great Kiliwa Swahili civilization. All of these are pretty much destroyed before the transatlantic slave trade starts. So this war, this colonization didn't just start with the British and the French. They got on board when they saw how sweet it was for the Turks and the Arabs, because you got to look at the Ottoman Empire controlling all of North Africa, much of East Africa down to Sudan, from the 9th century until the First World War in the 20th century. We never discussed the impact of that. What is the impact of that? There is a man, they used to call him Shehu, in the Sudanic West Africa, Nigeria, Cameroon area. And he was glorified for the great Fulani jihads. What is the Fulani jihad? That was not a picnic, that's war. War against the indigenous structures of West Africa was broken down even before the Portuguese could get there. By 1,500 years of war and enslavement and genocide and colonization by the Turkish and the Arabs and the Islamic forces in Africa. And they're still in Africa today. We are still wearing their identity till today. So you can't really have a discussion without taking that history into account, because history erases the mystery. It sounds like a cliche, but if you don't know history, you're not going to understand spiritual discussions. It's not going to make any sense. So if you want to really truly understand spiritual discussions, you've got to begin to study the history of our people for a couple of thousand years, because this wasn't one defeat. at the hand of the British, French, or Portuguese 500 years ago that has put us in the situation, or 100 years ago with the re-invasion of the continent after the Berlin Conference. This thing has been this war against our culture, this war against our civilizations, this war against our people's stability, this conquering and imposing your philosophy and your ideology as religion on us by the sword and then by the gun has been going on for a couple of thousand years. And the impact is enormous. Because most of us who are Muslim in Africa and even here, we think that is a legitimate African system of understanding reality. It is not. We have tried to make it that as much as we can. But that is a religion and a system of understanding and a philosophy that is foreign and alien to African peoples, that was imposed upon African people by war. People say, oh, Islam spread simply, oh, it was about trade, religion. Tell the dead ancestors to speak to me, that's what it was about. Study all the jihads across West Africa before the Berlin Conference. Tell me that's what it was about. What was the dispute in Sudan with Muhammad Ahmed? This is pre-Berlin Conference. And the so-called Egyptians and their British allies who would invade Sudan and slaughter our people and murder our leaders to get control of the Nile River for the purpose of trade down into inner Africa so they could steal our raw materials and get it quickly back to the Mediterranean. Let's have a real discussion, because spirituality is an involvement in a grasping and a living in your mind and body of your reality.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't something you can separate and say, oh, I'm here, Professor James Small, and I'm an intellectual, if or any of that. And I can read and write and speak this language. And then on the other side of it is my spirituality. No, there's no separation.
Professor, can you position your camera a little bit on your head? Because I really literally see you in the studio, just like I can't even get your mouth.
I need to go up.
Up, just go up a little bit. Again, just better? A little bit.
A little bit more.
I see you just like from here. I don't know. Thank you. That will be good. Thank you so very much.
All right. I don't know how to. I have to turn this off. And deal with the technology, but I've overdone it. I've hooked up all my phones and my computers to one another and trying to be more efficient.
Okay.
So
congratulations. Yeah.
So this is the best I can do because I've got a bigger screen, right? And I can't.
It's good. Yes. I mean, in the beginning it was okay, but you keep going. I don't know what was.
Oh, okay.
Now it's much better.
It's better.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Okay. So go ahead. Yeah.
That was the weight of what we're doing.
I do agree.
And I know, my brothers and sisters who are Muslims and my brothers and sisters who are Christians think when we try to talk about rebirthing African consciousness and rebirthing African culture, that it is an attack on them. And I would wish that your heart would understand more deeply, this is not an attack on any African man or woman or child who happens to be practicing the religion and the culture of our enemy. That means that you have been captured mentally, psychologically, physically, and spiritually by someone else's world view, how the world is seen. And in that world view, you're the minimalist. You're at the bottom of the pile. No matter how religious you are, no matter how well you speak their language, no matter which one of the universities you study at and get a degree, you're less than them in that culture, in that value system. And we're constantly fighting to prove we're equal and don't understand how silly that is. Why would a colonized people fight to be equal to the colonist who's a murderer and a thief and a rapist and a robber? To see that someone could make you do that with your mind, it says, oh, I am not the precious thing that was murdered and robbed. I want to be equal to the murderer and the robber. I know this is coarse, Susan, but the truth is the only light. To get truth, to get clarity in the minds of people, to see what colonialism and slavery have done to our minds, to our culture, our society. Even me, I started to speak a little fragments of a couple of languages, of Yoruba and of the Tree. But I don't know the language well enough to be worthy enough to even teach what I'm trying to teach, but I'm doing it because we have no choice. We have no choice because the language, our indigenous language, is the foundational key for our freedom. Let me say that one again. Our indigenous languages are the foundational key for our freedom, our spiritual freedom, our intellectual freedom, our psychological freedom, our cultural freedom. Because it is in the language that our ancestors have planted the historical understanding of cosmology and ecology that they inherited from the beginning of time. It is that language that lets you understand and feel what they meant when they said freedom. They didn't mean the same thing that the Frenchman means, or that the Belgian man means, or that the Englishman means. That's not what they were talking about. Someone came into our land, and for greed and ignorance and barbarity, they could have come and said, let's sit down and negotiate. You have something I want. What do I have that you want that I could exchange for what I want? But instead, they didn't come that way. They came into our land with swords and horses and spears and arrows, and then later with guns to take what they want that we had. And that involved taking our people, and then later taking our very minds, destroying our language, destroying our family structure, destroying our sense of self, destroying our understanding of nature, destroying our understanding of cosmology, and replacing it with their religion and their philosophy, which was based on the slaughter. It produces them to slaughter the innocent in the first place, and now we're going to become the minds that slaughter the innocents. That's what we're fighting to be equal to. You know how silly that sounds?
Absolutely.
Absolutely silly. But yet, their mind, their language, their philosophy, their understanding that they call religion of divinity has prepared us for self-destruction and self-management into slavery, even without their physical presence. We manage and enslave ourselves on their behalf because their language is a slave manager. Their philosophy is a slave manager. Their psychology is a slave manager for anybody who adopts it when it's not theirs. I hope people understand that, because I don't want to deal with what people are now interpreting or turning into what I call feel-good spirituality. Spirituality don't feel good when you're enslaved, okay? Spirituality is scary because it tells you you have to fight your enslavement. You have to fight your mental enslavement. You have to fight your spiritual enslavement. You have to fight your physical enslavement. And most people don't want to undertake that task because it hurts. But we have to start at the beginning. Spirituality is our reality. Our ancestors live eternally. There isn't a single, and I've studied African languages. I've done the philology, and I've done, trying to understand words. And the one thing I understood, there isn't a single African culture before our enslavement by other cultures that had a concept of death as the end of life. Not one.
Yeah.
We have no word for it. Because in our African understanding of reality, which we are calling spirituality, or our fashion sacred science, we knew everything was eternal. There is no beginning. There isn't a philosophy or history in the world that can point to a beginning of anything. And certainly, when you look at our cultures, and I'm looking at Igbo and Yoruba, I'm looking at Congo, I'm reading Banseki Fukiai and his, looking at spirituality in the Bantu Congo. I'm reading Asa Hilliard. I'm reading our brother from Nigeria talking about the rebirthing of African consciousness. I'm reading Dr. Noble's The Island of Meme. And these are people trying to tell us that we exist as a being in nature, as distinct as, let's say, a baobab tree. That tree is distinct. It has its own identity. It has its own function. It has its own evolution. And we, the African race, have allowed, through defeat, we fought a major war. We're still in a war. We've allowed for ourselves to be cloned by our invaders and defeaters. They have cloned us into a poor rendition, a poor hologram of a bad copy of themselves. A poor hologram. You know how bad that is? Of a bad copy of themselves. And we come back home. I'm so happy to see you with your beautiful African necklace. And I'm happy to see you with your beautiful African hairdo. But even I'm fighting my grandchildren. They got all this hair that's still in their hair that hangs down their back. And I asked one of my 15-year-old baby, why did you do it? Because I took her to Africa this summer with me for her first trip. But the deal was, you got to get the extensions out of your hair to enter Africa. You will not enter Africa with extensions. Even I know people over there use extensions just like you do here. You're going home to Africa with your natural hair in a natural state to greet your ancestors. And for them spiritually to greet you, you must go this way. So I took two of them. One was 18, one was 15. And it was rough. Couldn't get them up in the morning. They were so locked into the death functioning of so-called false Western civilization that they could not function when they got in Africa. It took a week, half of the trip, to get them to realize, I'm in Africa with Grandpa. I'm in Ghana. I'm in Kemet. I'm with my people. I'm with the people I hear talk about, the people in the book. I'm on the land that they say we came from. It took those babies a week just to begin, and they were so frightened. They were sleeping every day to block out having to grasp Africa, because in their minds, they have been so de-Africanized. Even though they were raised in my house, but they go out my door in the morning at 8 to school, and they come back at 3 or 4 in the evening, having been reprogrammed by the enemy. Because the school system all across Africa have the curricula of the colonialists. We need to all read Things Fall Apart again and again and again. You know that book?
Of course. Things fall apart.
Please.
Chinua Achebe.
Yes. Make sure everybody realize we missed Nchebe's point. Even I had to begin to reread that book this year again, and I'm just truly beginning to understand what this brother understood and was trying to explain to us about how colonialism de-Africanizes us.
Absolutely.
At all levels. He teaches us what cultural genocide is, what spiritual genocide is, what social genocide is. And he showed that when someone takes away your language, you are in big trouble. Even if you still speak your language, but you've made your language a second language to the language of the oppressors. So you have minimalized your language. And in minimalizing your language, you have reduced your ability to hear your ancestry. Because it is in that language is our library. That language is our archive. That language is our encyclopedia that stores the millions and millions and millions of years of experiences that our ancestors had on this planet. Probably billions of years of experiences and memory stored in the very cells in our body, in the very DNA in our bodies. We cannot unlock them because we've given up the key to language. Not just uttering the language in words. Many of us can do that. But knowing grammatically how the language works. Understanding the etymology of every word in our language when we speak it. What have the ancestors left us as a tool to understand how I'm related to you? There you are, way over there, looking just as beautiful as heaven, I must say. And I'm way here in America. But I'm as connected to you as your arm is to your torso. There is no real separation of me and you, according to our understanding, our ancestors' understanding of what we call spirituality. We are, in this time, trying to understand how to reclaim ourselves. Our young people are coming back from Britain, from France, from Italy, from Germany. Our diasporans are coming from the Caribbean and coming from the United States and other places where they've dumped us around the world over the centuries. But we're coming back as the white man. We're coming back as the Eurasian and the European. We're not coming back as Africans. We must realize there must be a decolonization of consciousness. There must be an effort to rebirth African consciousness. And that effort to rebirth African consciousness must start with learning an African language. Then it has to start with understanding the cultural fabric of any given African society. Why is this festival here? Why is this ritual here? Why is this shrine here? Why is this dance here? Why is this drum rhythm here? What is it that our ancestors have left for us? We set them aside like they're little bits and pieces of toys. The drum is just a drum. We have no understanding of why the tool was created and how it should be used to integrate into the rest of our being. Why that particular dance the Ewe doing? Why is that dance the Salenke is doing? Why is that dance the Cameroonian in the South is doing versus the dance that the Cameroonian in the North is doing? What is the message in the dance? What is the story told? What are they trying to say to us? We talk about God, and then we push it somewhere up in the sky. And even when we said we go back to our religion, we got people saying, oh, Africans have many gods. Even ISIS said, oh, we have multiple gods. No, we don't. I've studied now, and I haven't seen a single African language that deals with multiple gods. Not one. Yeah, so study. Not a single one. We understood and expressed in all of our being, our language, our society, that there is only one organism that exists that we refer to as the divine, and we exist as a part of that organism.
Yes.
You know, our culture is very clear. It tells us that what is called science is just a part of our sacred science system. And what the West have done, they've taken aspect of the system that's called science that deals with the physical realm, and they've moved that over here. Then they take the things that deal with the spiritual, the inner self, and with cosmology, and they've moved that into a thing called religion, which has no connections. And we dance and sing and shout in these religions and walk out into the poverty and the filth that we walked into the church with on a Sunday morning. And not a darn thing has changed, because it isn't a system of change. Religion is not a system based on changing your spiritual dynamics. Matter of fact, it's a system to keep you in check. It is a slave tool. It is a tool to keep you managed by others. It takes away your personal relationship with the rest of the universe. And now your connection to the universe is through mythical characters that always looks like your enemies. They're your gods, they're your saints, they're your this. And yet they never deliver freedom for you. They did not get rid of colonialism. They did not get rid of the people who dumped their radiation poison off of our shore. They do not get rid of the barges of American garbage, which is dumped off of the shore of Cote d'Ivoire and other cities. They did not get rid of the South Korean fishing boats that come and vacuum up our fishing. So where we used to get a red snapper 2 feet long, we now get a red snapper 2 inches long. That the fish that we catch to feed our people, to provide the protein that we share across the country, is not there because someone else is there, is harvesting it. Did that God you pray to send those boats back to Asia where they belong? No. Did it give you your money, your worth of your gold or your diamonds or your cobalt or your coltan or your manganese? No. So what the hell good is it to have a religion, to have a system of worship where you're supposed to be speaking to the divine, who's supposed to protect you and guide you, and it solves none of your problems? You wake up every morning dreaming of how to get your son or your daughter out of your village, out of your country, into the foreign country, to learn the foreign ways, to earn money, to bring back home just so you can eat, when you're sitting on the largest repository of wealth on the planet Earth. So let's be real serious. Spirituality is not about feeling good and having a good old time like religion got you doing. I'm glad this is Sunday. Y'all need to get your butts up out of those religious spaces and get into a real spaces. I would love to see it, brother King Hercules, because mathematics is one of the essential tools that Africans created to explain spirituality. And when we talk about our relationship to divinity, it can only best be described if you're willing to do the readings in quantum physics that is required to understand it. A good book that lets you see the earliest relationship between what we call today quantum physics and an understanding of cosmology and ecology is called the Pyramid Text in ancient Kemet. The Pyramid Text, which precedes the book of the coming forth by day. It precedes the book of the dead. It precedes the Bible. It precedes the Torah. It precedes the Quran. And it gives an explanation of how things came to be. I think I've recited it a few times, one of the passages where Amun realized that when I realize I exist, existence exists, you know? And he says, when I realized I existed in existence, Ma'at, the feminine principle of the universe, truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, and balance was at my side. And I cough up shu, meaning the gases and the things and that we call outer space, and spat out tefnut, you know, which are the elements and the minerals. And they came together in a marriage that created everything we see in the sky called Nut, and everything we see on earth called Geb, which is made up of all of the things that are in the sky. Most people forget we live on the planet Earth. Planet Earth is an how do you say? It's a spacecraft. It's in outer space, just like Jupiter, Mars, and Pluto. In the same way we see Saturn and Jupiter and Uranus in space, so are we on Earth in that same space. And we are orbiting thousands and thousands of miles per hour around this ball of fire we call the sun, that star. At the same time, we're spinning on our own axis thousands of miles an hour, and we feel none of it. Further than that, the sun that is pulling us with its gravitational pull is sailing tens of thousands of miles, almost the speed of light, through the Milky Way, and we're sailing with it and don't even realize it anymore. But our ancestors realized this. That's why you can go and study the Dogon culture, and they can talk about stars that no one was able to see except with telescopes a few years ago. How did they know outer space? Because they understood that I am a part of that. I am not separate from the rest of the things in space. You know, I remember I had to go through an initiation. And you get something that people refer to as possess. And you dance, and I couldn't dance with it now, but I danced then. And I went to places that was beyond this world. And I saw ancestors by the thousands in another place of all kinds of different cultures. And I realized that the energy and matter that makes me up is not as solid as I think, because it can be dissolved in a moment. And so when we look at our systems, like the Yoruba one, which I'm a part of, they have a word called Amo, and it means knowledge. And in their meaning of knowledge, it means the raw information, facts, and skills acquired through study or experiences. You know, knowing that, for instance, that fire produces heat. So that's an example of what we consider to be knowledge. So we say Amo. And then we call Oyi, understanding. And the meaning of understanding in the Yoruba tradition is the ability to interpret, comprehend, and explain why and how things work. Okay? And that's a why, that's a how. And a good example of that is understanding the scientific process behind fire and how it creates heat. And then the third one is Ogbon, wisdom, meaning the quality of having good judgment and insight, which allows for the skillful application of knowledge and understanding to make such decisions. You know, the good answer to that is how to best use knowledge and understanding. Those three things are basic a basic to African spiritual understanding. Spirituality wasn't some mystical something hidden behind a cloth in a hut that you couldn't see making noise. Spirituality was understanding your reality and applying that understanding to how you lived your life in that reality. Spirituality will give you the tools to destroy the colonialism of your mind. Spirituality will give you the tools to destroy cultural genocide. See? And so we have to really relocate spirituality in our mind. How do we really see this thing that we're calling spirituality? We have to redefine it. It is not in an African religion, because Africans didn't have religions. We didn't need religion, because religion, the very word, means to bind back. That means you've broken away from something and you got to bind yourself back to the thing. No, we were the thing. Our ancestors were the thing. They understood themselves as the thing being the totality of being, the totality of everything as one. And us being a part of that totality with an understanding of what it meant to be a part of that totality. And so we imitated it socially with the way we construct families and the way we raise children. We raise children according to the way the universe raised children. You know, we construct the family to be representative of our understanding of how the universe is constructed. Our family was constructed in relationship to how the cells in our body is constructed to create a relationship to form this seeming mass that you're looking at called me. But every one of those cells in my body has a separate being, you know, but they've agreed to work together to make me. If they have an argument, I disappear. If my cells decide, well, I'm going to move away an immeasurable space because I'm angry with the cell of this group here, then I disappear. I only exist because there's a working relationship based on the principles of unity, which today we call Ubuntu and Pan-Africanism, without understanding what we're saying. Mm-hmm. But our bodies is the perfect universe. Our ancestors understood that. And so when they built the village is designed, they didn't just build a hut here and a house here and a corral for cattle or sheep there. There was a specific place in the compound for everything. Where the food is prepared, where the guest is greeted, where the guest is entertained before they can come to any other part of the house, where the animal is safely kept. Everything was organized based on an understanding on how the universe is organized. Mm. And it all depends on harmony that came from a unity that was based on mutual respect of all things for all things. Mm. You know? And they look at our culture. How you come into a culture and the people are peaceful and they're living with a relationship to the earth where you don't even cut down a tree, your brother or sister, for use, unless you have a conversation, letting them understand why you're doing it and beg them for forgiveness that you even have to do it. Just the vibration of your words into the ether around you is heard and understood by that tree. We can speak to water and change the molecular content of a glass of water. We do it, we just don't know what we're doing. Mm. Okay. So we don't understand spirituality. That's why I'm spending all this time going over this. Spirituality is not religion. Okay. At best, one could say religion could have been an attempt to create a tool to teach spirituality, but its history would prove that to be a bad definition. And I used to say that, but then I realized, no, its history proved it did not even attempt to teach spirituality. It an attempt to enslave you so that you did not understand spirituality. Spirituality is your relationship to the rest of the universe via the chain of your ancestors. And you've heard me say this before. My mother and father, when they gave birth to me, who did they give birth to? They gave birth to themselves. My grandparents, when they gave birth to my parents, who did they give birth to? They gave birth to themselves. Who am I? I am all of them. Now let's go back millions of years. I am all of the millions and millions and millions of my ancestors compiled into one complex organism of vibration and rhythm and electricity and heat and energy in an organized fashion. What our culture was our educational system to keep us organized in our reality.
Correct.
You know, and so they've colonized our culture, trampled upon it, and got us trampling upon it. If you watch TV shows and even on this TikTok thing, every day I'm trying to figure out how to get to it to stop it. There's an attack on what the African woman, she's always shown as a whore. She's always trying to have sex. And the African man is always trying to rape the African woman. And the African family, there's no loyalty between the wife and the husband when one goes away. And this stuff is shown day in, day out, all day long on TikTok. And we're thinking it's entertainment. No, 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 no. It is an attack on your psyche by an enemy that's trying to socialize our children to self-hate their ancestry so they won't look back for liberation. And the only way you're going to liberate is to look back, like the Ghanaian Sankofa, Akan Sankofa. Go back and fetch it. What are you going back to fetch? The wisdom of your ancestors. That's what's going to liberate you. Guns. We tried the guns in Mozambique. We tried the guns in Guinea-Bissau. We tried the guns in Namibia. We tried the guns in Zimbabwe. We were ready to use the guns in South Africa. Now everybody says, oh, we're liberated in all these places. We are as bad off today or worse than we were 50 years ago.
Yes. True.
So that wasn't the path to liberation. There might be a role for guns and doing certain things, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. The path to true liberation is to reclaim your ancestors as you, not philosophically, but actually. I am those people whose pictures you see behind me. Those are my ancestors back there. That pretty one is my mama, right? She's the finest woman I've ever put eyes on. You know, last week was the 24th year that she left that body. You know, I am her. That little girl I took with me to Africa.
Yes.
That's already been traumatized by the negativity of this society. And I didn't take her for entertainment. I was trying to save my baby.
Yes.
You know, I was trying to save my baby. And the only thing I can do is take her home to Africa and pray that the energy, the vibration, the rhythm, the spirit of all those ancestors, when she walked into the slave dungeons, would set upon her. When she walked into the village and those women hug her and welcome her, was set upon her. And it did. By the time we had gotten through Ghana and got to Kemet, I saw a different child. In less than 10 days. And I didn't spend a lot of time with her teaching her this. I decided to let them be on their own with the rest of the people. Let them find their way. My job was to get them up in the morning, make sure they got on the bus and go to whatever site or village we were visiting. And I saw when the child began to see that there's something different, that somebody have lied to me. When last year, now she still came back and she put a little hair on, but I said, don't be too hard. It's a slow walk, But I remember last year when my daughter came to me and said, Daddy, my baby says she's ugly, that she's not beautiful. And she's sitting up in the room crying. We were afraid she's going to commit suicide because the world she was in and the things she's getting on social media has launched such an attack on the psyche of African children. If you hate what you see in the mirror, then you hate your ancestors that is in you.
Mm.
So how can you then try to seek salvation and freedom and liberation for these young minds unless we find a methodology that makes sense? And the only methodology I know is to return to language, return to culture, return to history, return to rhythmic patterns and vibrations of our ancestors. Become our ancestors again. We are our ancestors. Every cell in my body come from that woman who we perceive to be dead over there, and that man is dancing with her in the next picture who we perceive to be dead. How can they be dead when I've got all of their cells living, talking to you?
Correct.
Right? But I need to understand what that relationship is. This is what spirituality is. Let me understand how my mother, how my father, how my auntie, how my uncle, how my grandpeople who are no longer physically with us are still here with us through me, as me, through you, as you. That system of understanding is what we call culture, that use our sound, our dances, our musical instrument, rhythm, patterns, our language especially, to explain cosmology and ecology to us. So we knew why we eat this food. We knew why we ate this food only a certain time of year. We know why we eat a certain time of day. Somebody over time had worked out those patterns. It may be different in Africa, depending on the different environment you're in, but those type of patterns were worked out just to deal with our health. Being healthy is one of the highest forms of spiritual activity. Being healthy is one of the highest forms of spiritual activity, because only a healthy house, a healthy temple, a healthy kingdom will allow for the electrical, for the vibratorial, for the energy, for the rhythm patterns that connect you with the rest of the universe to be perfected. I am here to perfect the divine. I am the divine in miniature. I am the particle of sunlight. Every particle of sunlight, every beam of sunlight contains the totality of the substance of the sun. And that seems so simple. But they've made us, through religion and through cultural genocide, see the world differently, out of fear. Once they made us think this body was more important than everything else around it in the universe, then they frightened you with taking this away and controlled you with fear. This body will dissipate no matter what. You can live to be 90, you can live to be 100, you can live to be 115, but it will dissipate. They can't take nothing away from you. The secret to life is to have no fear. And your only choice in life is freedom, which is to be your ancestors again, to be your culture again, to be your value system again, to be your worldview again, or death. That is to be a clone and an imitator of the thing that's destroying you, which then make you the agent of your own destruction. While he sits back and laughs. Spirituality is simply being fully engaged in your daily reality with a connection and an understanding through your ancestry that you should never let be broken ever again once you reestablish it. It's always established, but to be conscious of it is when you reestablish it. The ancestors have never abandoned you. We've abandoned them. You see, the ancestors never abandoned us. We abandoned them through the ignorance forced on us through the colonialism and the slavery that make us curse our shrines and call it all kinds of negative words. We see the movies in Africa. We see the nice movies, and then we see the movies that anytime someone is trying to use African culture, there's black smoke puffing up, there's people dying. He's using it to hurt people. That's silliness. If we had that kind of power, would we not doing it that way? Would we not have driven the enemy out of our land a long time ago? If I could just take a stick and stomp the ground, and all of the French troops would leave Chad tomorrow, I would be stomping the ground all day. But that's not how reality works in the African framework of understanding. It is having knowledge of your ancestors' way. They were making a better world for us. We must take what they gave us as a tool and make the better world for the future. But you cannot go forward if you are adopting the worldview, the belief practices, and the culture of the one who murdered your mother and your father, because then you will continue to murder your mother and your father. That's the simplest way. I know it sounds crude for me to put it, but that's the simplest way to put it. Susan Tata, I look at your face, and you're just this beautiful African woman, but in you, I see your mother. I see your grandmother. I see your auntie. Those ones who are gone, they're all living in you. That's why you do what you do. That's them. You're the new temple. You're the new house. You're their new personality, but it's them. They have always been here. And we, in each generation, we expand ourselves. What the enemy has done by forcing us to accept his way, we're expanding his ancestors while we are deflating our ancestors.
Sure.
Our ancestors, I am my ancestor. They were me yesteryear. My children will be me tomorrow. My grandchildren will be me tomorrow. I will never die. Impossible. That little girl who was with me in Kemet, who come racing back down the pyramid and go, Grandpa, Grandpa, I went to the top, and I stood by the tomb of the king. She had never read a book on that tomb before. She had never been in, she didn't know what the pyramid really was, other than that there's a pyramid in Africa. You know, but something happened there. And so she went to this place and she stood up over the sarcophagus in the pose of Ma'at. My baby didn't know nothing about no Ma'at. So I asked her, I said, why did you do that? She said, I just felt like doing that. You know? And now she talks to me. Once last year, I pick up from school every day, but she never answered my call. And she may call back 15, 20 minutes. Now she answers the phone every time I call. She was given a necklace by Joshua, and I got to tell Joshua about this beautiful necklace, he said, and she lost it. She cried for 2 days in Ghana. We had the hotel manager interview every staff member. We trying to find this beautiful necklace from Zimbabwe. But I had another necklace here on the Orishas that have all of the colors. So she wears that now under her clothes. Because she knows there's something to trying to reconnect back to Africa.
Yes.
You know. And she just turned 16 last week. And so the colors she chose for herself was red and black. I said, oh, why did she choose those colors? She said, Grandpa, I don't know. I just like red and black. And I says, you know, the lady, the priest, when your mother was told she could never have children, and Nana Ofuosa came from Ghana and blessed your mother. And 10 months later, you came. And your mother didn't know you were pregnant until she was 6 months. Right? And I says, and when we first asked you, when you started to talk, to speak, where are you from? That little baby said, I'm from Ghana. And she would choose red and black. Two of the most sacred colors in the Akan tradition. And those were her balloons, and that's where she took a picture. And her cake was covered in leopards, as a leopard skin. Something happened on that trip for my baby. And I have to just keep enforcing that something. So I give her different books to read, smaller, shorter books, and trying to expand her knowledge of our culture. And I'm trying down to, I've got the tapes for them to try to learn Tree. So they can say Mimiwachi. And, you know, Mimiwachi. So they can begin to, you know, I'm just trying to learn the language, and you have to get the courage to speak it when you go into the culture, whether you think you are doing it well or not. And then the people will help you get to do it well, to pronounce it right. And so I'm trying to teach them all the language. So now I'm gathering every Sunday in my basement, all the grandchildren that surround me, because I cannot let the world have them. When I saw how far those two little ones were away, and they wanted to find a way, but they didn't know a way, even though Grandpa's been talking. Grandpa's been so minimalized in the family even. You know, it says the prophet is never so unwelcome except in his own village. And the other family members have gone this way, gone that way. So the children looking at, well, Grandpa may be sounding good, but I'm scared to identify with Grandpa, right? And when they get older, I start getting the calls, you know. I start getting the calls when they go to college. And I say, Grandpa, this, Grandpa. And then I have to say, okay, then this is the opportunity to teach. Then I take this opportunity to reintroduce them to giving rebirth to the African consciousness that's always been there laying dormant, you know. And so we have to all realize Africa can't die. The ancestors can't die. They're asleep because we don't realize their presence. When we realize their presence and take it to a higher level, not just realizing they're present, but that they're present as me. My ancestors are present as me. I am them. That's not a belief. And you cannot scientifically disprove that. Bring all your physics, whatever you want, all will enforce what I just said.